If you dance this waltz, I'll marry my son to you." William Thompson III sneered loudly enough for all of Manhattan's elite to hear, pointing his champagne glass at the black woman who had just stumbled and dropped a crystal tray on the marble floor of the ballroom. The deafening sound of shattering glass silenced the 200 guests at the opening party for Thompson Holdings' new skyscraper. All eyes turned to Kesha Williams, 35, who had been working as a contract cleaner at the event for just 3 weeks. "Dad, you're being ridiculous," whispered Jonathan Thompson, 28, embarrassed by his millionaire father's cruel joke. But William completely ignored his son's disapproval, drunk on power, and the $1,000 whiskey he had been drinking all night. No, let me finish," William continued, walking to the center of the room as if he were presiding over a court of law. "This person clearly doesn't have the coordination to clean properly. How about we test her to see if she can even move to the beat?" Kesha remained kneeling, picking up the crystal shards with trembling hands. But her eyes revealed something no one there could decipher. It wasn't humiliation or fear. It was calm, measured, controlled, as if she were evaluating every word, every cruel laugh, every look of contempt. "Mr. Thompson," the event manager intervened discreetly, "perhaps it would be better?" "Better nothing," William cut him off, gesturing dramatically. "Play a waltz. If she can dance better than my wife, I'll marry my son to her on the spot. Imagine, the heir to the Thompson fortune marrying the cleaning lady." Collective laughter echoed through the hall like a wave of cruelty. Some women covered their mouths, pretending to be shocked but clearly enjoying the spectacle. The men shook their heads as if witnessing a comedy of bad taste. Kesha finally stood, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked directly at William Thompson. For a moment that seemed like an eternity, she remained silent, as if making a decision that could change not just that night, but the entire power dynamic in the room. "I accept," she said in a clear voice that cut through the air like a blade. The hall fell completely silent. Even the orchestra stopped playing, confused by the sudden turn of events. William blinked, his arrogance faltering. "What did you say?" "I said, I accept your challenge," Kesha repeated, now with a subtle smile that sent an inexplicable shiver down the spines of some guests. "But when I dance better than your wife, you will keep your word, even if you meant it as a joke." At that moment, while everyone mocked and laughed louder, thinking they were about to witness the biggest embarrassment of the decade, no one noticed the familiar gleam in Kesha's eyes. The same gleam that had once mesmerized audiences on the world's most prestigious stages before a single night of tragedy changed everything. Victoria Thompson, William's wife, a 50-year-old woman known for teaching ballroom dancing to Manhattan's elite, approached with a venomous smile. "Darling, do you really think I need to lower myself to compete with this?" she said, gesturing dismissively toward Kesha. "Don't be modest, Victoria," William replied, clearly enjoying the situation. "You won that Club Waltz trophy last year. That should be more than enough for this demonstration." Kesha remained silent, but her mind drifted back 15 years to when she was known as Kesha Morrow, principal dancer with the American National Ballet. She remembered the nights when entire audiences rose to their feet in ovation, the glowing reviews comparing her to the greatest ballerinas in history, the feeling of flying across the world's most prestigious stages. It had all ended in one tragic night. A special performance for the political elite, a car accident on the way home, 3 months in a coma, and a cruel diagnosis. Her legs would never be the same again. The doctors said she would be lucky to walk normally. Dance professionally? Impossible. "Jonathan," William said suddenly, turning to his son, "go get your camera. I want this recorded. The day a cleaning lady tried to pass herself off. As a dancer at my event," Jonathan hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Dad, this has gone too far. She was just doing her job." "The girl," William interrupted sarcastically. Accepted the challenge, and now she's going to entertain us. Or would you rather I tell your girlfriend about that little situation last week? Jonathan's face paled. Kesha realized then that blackmail was yet another tool of William's toxic control. Put the music on, William ordered the DJ. And place your bets. $500 if you're betting on my wife. $1,000 for anyone foolish enough to bet on the maid. Cruel laughter echoed through the room as some guests actually began placing bets, treating the moment as free entertainment. Victoria positioned herself in the center of the dance floor, doing a few theatrical stretches to show off her experience. You know what? William said, approaching Kesha with a wicked smile. When you lose, and you will lose, I want you to get down on your knees and apologize for wasting everyone's time. And then, obviously, you're fired. It was at that moment that something changed in Kesha's eyes. That same determination returned. The fire that had carried her across international stages, the strength that had carried her through months of brutal therapy just to walk again. The same dignity that had kept her alive when she lost everything. She had worked for her entire life. Mr. Thompson, she said, with a calmness that sent an inexplicable chill down the spines of some of those present. When I win, and I will win, I want you to keep your word about the marriage, but I also want something else. William raised his eyebrows, amused by her audacity. Oh, she wants to make demands now. Very well. Amuse me. What else do you want besides marrying my son? I want you to admit, in front of all these guests, that you judged a woman wrongly based on the color of her skin and the work she does. And I want a public apology. The room tensed. Some guests whispered among themselves, realizing that the situation had taken a far more serious turn than they had expected. William laughed loudly. You've got guts, I'll give you that. All right, I accept. But when you make a fool of yourself, you'll leave here not only without a job, but without any dignity left. What William Thompson III didn't know was that he was about to face not just a cleaning lady with a mysterious past, but a woman who had already lost everything once and knew exactly how hard it was to fight for every crumb of respect in a society that had rejected her. While Victoria prepared herself with basic ballroom dance moves across the dance floor, a silent storm was brewing. Because there is a brutal difference between someone who learned to dance as a hobby and someone who was born to make dance a universal language, even when fate tried to take it away from her forever. Kesha stood motionless in the corner of the dance floor, but her mind worked like a precision machine. 15 years of brutal physical therapy, of learning to walk again, of accepting that she would never be the same had forged in her a resilience none of those spoiled rich kids could understand. Look at her, one of the guests whispered to a friend. She's probably never stepped on a dance floor in her life. What unnecessary humiliation, another murmured. William Thompson circled the room like a satisfied predator, collecting bets from the guests and deliberately heightening the humiliation. $500 says, she can't even make it through the song without tripping, he announced, raising a glass of champagne. 1,000 for anyone who bets, she'll run out in the middle of her performance. Laughter echoed throughout the room, but Kesha noticed something William didn't. His son Jonathan wasn't laughing. In fact, the young man seemed increasingly uncomfortable, shifting uneasily near the wall and avoiding the crowd's gaze. Then she noticed something familiar about Jonathan's face. It wasn't the first time she had seen him. 3 weeks ago, when she started working at Thompson Holdings events, she had noticed a young man who always treated the contract workers with respect, unlike the other executives. It was him. Miss, said a low voice beside her. Kesha turned and saw a black man in his 60s wearing the discreet uniform of the building's security team. I'm Marcus, head of security. I've worked here for 20 years, he said, approaching discreetly, pretending to check something on his radio. I saw you dance before, he murmured so low only she could hear. 15 years ago at the National Theater. Kesha Morrow, principal soloist. I was security there, too. Kesha's heart raced. Someone had recognized her. After all these years of keeping her identity a secret, working anonymous jobs just to survive, someone finally knew who she really was. I thought you died in the accident, Marcus continued, his eyes revealing a mixture of shock and admiration. The newspapers said you'd never dance again. The newspapers said a lot of things, Kesha replied, keeping her voice steady. Not all of it was true. Marcus nodded slowly. What they did to you was an injustice, and what they're doing now. He glanced in William's direction, who was still laughing loudly, is even worse. At that moment, Kesha made a decision she had been putting off for 15 years. Not just about dancing, but about who she really was and what she was willing to reveal to the world. Marcus, she said, I need a favor. After I dance, no matter what happens, I need you to record everything that follows, especially the reactions. He looked at her, confused, but nodded. Sure. But why? Kesha smiled for the first time that night. Because some people need to be reminded that underestimating someone based on their appearance can be the most expensive mistake of their lives. Meanwhile, William had decided to make the spectacle even more cruel. You know what? He shouted to the entire room. Let's make this more interesting. If she can finish the song without falling or stopping, I'll give her $1,000. But when she fails, and she will fail, I want her to clean this entire room on her knees in front of all of us. The crowd reacted with a mixture of laughter and uncomfortable murmurs. Some guests began to realize the situation had crossed the line, but no one had the courage to confront William Thompson III. Dad, Jonathan tried once more. This has gone too far. Shut up, Jonathan, William snapped. You're too soft. That's exactly why you need to learn how the real world works. There's a natural hierarchy, and people like her, he pointed at Kesha, need to know their place. It was at that moment Kesha began to move, not to position herself on the dance floor, but to stretch. The movements were subtle, almost imperceptible to most, but Marcus recognized them immediately. They were the same preparatory exercises she had done before every performance at the National Theater. My God, Marcus muttered to himself. She's really going to do this. Victoria Thompson, realizing attention was shifting toward. Kesha decided to begin her presentation. Start the music, she ordered. Let's get this charade over with. The DJ, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, put on a classical waltz. Victoria began to dance alone, executing competent but predictable ballroom moves. She had learned to dance at elite clubs with expensive private instructors, but her technique was amateurish by professional standards. Still, she received polite applause from the audience. After all, to them, she represented everything they considered appropriate, rich, white, educated, and polished in the best social circles. Well done, dear, said William, applauding exaggeratedly. Now, it's time for our guest artist. Kesha slowly walked to the center of the dance floor. Each step was measured, controlled, and filled with a quiet dignity that made some of the guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. This was not how someone humiliated or defeated was supposed to behave. What song would you like? Asked the DJ, more out of politeness than genuine interest. The same one, Kesha replied simply. But from the beginning, William laughed. Oh, she wants a second chance? How lovely. All right, play the song. Let's see how long she lasts before she gives up. What none of them knew was that Kesha had chosen that song for a reason. It was a waltz she had danced hundreds of times during her career. One she knew by heart, a piece that flowed through her muscle memory as naturally as breathing. More importantly, it was one of the last pieces she had performed before the accident. A night that had earned her a 5-minute standing ovation at the National Theater, a performance critics had described as transcendent and emotionally devastating, one of the finest in American dance history. As the music prepared to begin, Kesha closed her eyes. Memories surged back. flying across the stage, feeling the music pulse through her veins, knowing without doubt that she had been born to do this. The doctors had said she would never dance again. The media had declared her career finished. And for years, she had believed them, until slowly, painfully, she rebuilt not just her muscles, but her relationship with dance. She had never returned to the stage. She had never sought fame again, but she had never stopped dancing in secret, alone, when life became too heavy to bear. The music began, and with it, something extraordinary was about to happen in that hall filled with prejudice and arrogance. Under the weight of condescending stares, her hands positioned themselves with precision. The musicians frowned slightly, sensing instinctively that they were about to witness something far beyond an amateur's attempt. What none of them could have imagined was that those opening bars would mark not only the rebirth of a lost legend, but the moment the entire power dynamic in that room would be shaken forever. The first notes echoed and Kesha began to move. It was not the hesitant shuffle everyone expected. Instead, she rose with a grace that made the air shift, as if gravity had loosened its hold on her. Her opening movements were subtle, almost restrained, letting the crowd keep their expectations low. But as the music swelled, something remarkable began to unfold. Each step grew more fluid, each turn more precise, each movement charged with an emotion so raw it began to mesmerize everyone watching. William Thompson stopped laughing. Victoria stopped smiling. The room went silent, captivated. They were not watching a cleaning lady trying to dance. They were witnessing an artist reclaiming her place in the world. "My God," someone murmured. She's exceptional." Kesha launched into a sequence of pirouettes that would challenge even seasoned ballerinas, followed by a grand jeté soaring across the floor with a lightness that defied physics. These were not ballroom steps. This was classical ballet at its highest level, masterfully woven into a waltz. Marcus, true to his promise, discreetly aimed his phone to capture not just the performance, but the reactions, the widening eyes, the stunned silence, and most of all, William Thompson's face as it shifted from arrogance to confusion to something bordering on fear. "This is impossible," William muttered under his breath, his voice cracking. "Who the hell is this woman?" When Kesha began the final sequence, the one that had once brought the National Theater to its feet, a combination of techniques she had invented herself, the truth struck some of the guests like lightning. "Wait," said a woman in the audience, an arts patron known for attending every major performance in the city. "I know those moves. I've seen that sequence before. But where?" Jonathan Thompson was frozen, camera in hand, recording every second. Unlike his father, he recognized greatness when he saw it, no matter who displayed it. The music built to its climax. Kesha spun into a series of fouettes, rapid, continuous turns on one leg, executed with precision and power. It was a display of skill, strength, and artistry that left the room breathless. The music ended. Kesha finished in a final pose, arms outstretched, head high, breathing controlled, radiating both power and vulnerability. Silence. The kind of silence that follows. Something unforgettable. Then slowly, one person began to clap. Another joined. Within seconds, the hall erupted. Applause thundered through the room, echoing off the walls, shaking the windows. "Bravo! Extraordinary!" Voices rose, united in awe. William Thompson was pale as a ghost, realizing he had just been completely humiliated by someone he considered inferior. Worse, he had been disgraced in front of Manhattan's elite, who now looked at him with a mixture of disapproval and embarrassment. At that moment, Marcus approached Kesha, still. "Recording. Ladies and gentlemen," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Allow me to introduce Kesha Morrow, former principal soloist with the American National Ballet." The name echoed through the hall like a bomb. Several people gasped. Others let out exclamations of shock. Kesha Morrow was a legend, Marcus continued. A ballerina who mysteriously disappeared at the height of her career after a tragic accident. Impossible, Victoria Thompson stammered. Kesha Morrow is dead, or at least she never danced again after the accident. Clearly, said Kesha, finally breaking her silence. The rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. The crowd laughed, but William Thompson didn't find it funny. The reality of what had happened began to hit him like a freight train. He had publicly humiliated one of the greatest entertainers in American history. And worse, it was all caught. On tape. Mr. Thompson, Marcus said, still holding up his phone, you stated that if she danced better than your wife, you would marry her to your son. I believe this entire audience can attest that the condition has been more than met. Jonathan, realizing where the situation was headed, approached Kesha. Miss Morrow, he said, I would like to publicly apologize for my father's behavior. It was inexcusable. Jonathan, shut up, exploded William, his mask of control finally slipping. You will not apologize to anyone, especially not to her. It was then that Kesha revealed the full extent of her plan. Mr. Thompson, she said calmly, I believe we have a marriage proposal to discuss. After all, a man of your standing surely keeps his word, doesn't he? The audience fell silent, realizing they were witnessing something far greater than a simple display of talent. You must be crazy if you think I'm going to honor a drunken joke, William growled, his arrogance returning in the form of desperation. Ah, but it wasn't a joke, Kesha said, smiling. Marcus, could you play back the recording of Mr. Thompson's statements from tonight? Marcus held his phone high enough for everyone to hear. The recording played clearly, capturing William making the bet, doubling the conditions, adding humiliations, and publicly declaring he would marry his son to Kesha if she won the challenge. And here he is confirming the terms, Marcus said. As the playback continued, even after I specified that he would have to keep his word, the audience murmured, some laughing nervously, others clearly embarrassed by the situation William had created for himself. That's blackmail, William shouted, completely losing his composure. No, Kesha corrected calmly. This is accountability. You made a public bet with clear terms in front of 200 witnesses. Now you have to decide if you are a man of your word, or if your reputation is worth less than your prejudice. Jonathan moved closer to Kesha. Miss Morrow, he said, if you will allow me, I would like to honor my father's word. Not because I am forced to, but because any man would be honored to marry someone of your talent and dignity. The audience murmured again, surprised by the unexpected romantic turn. William was now visibly shaking with rage. Jonathan, if you do this, you're out of the company, out of the family, out of everything. Then so be it, Jonathan replied, extending his hand to Kesha. Some things are more important than money, Dad, like having integrity. Kesha looked at the outstretched hand, then at the audience, then at William Thompson, who was clearly having what appeared to be a public breakdown. Mr. Thompson, she said, 15 years ago, people like you decided I had no value after I became imperfect. Today you tried to humiliate me because of the color of my skin and the work I do to survive. But you know what I've discovered? True nobility doesn't come from inheritance or bank accounts. It comes from how we treat other human beings when we think no one is watching. She turned to Jonathan. Your son seems to have learned that lesson despite your best efforts. As for the proposal, she smiled. I'll accept dinner with him, but marriage, that's something two people decide together, based on love and respect, not humiliating bets. The audience erupted in applause once again. But this time, it wasn't just for the dance. It was approval for the dignity and wisdom Kesha had shown. William Thompson, realizing he had lost not only the bet, but the respect of everyone present, including his own son, muttered something about leaving it to the lawyers and stormed out of the hall, followed by a mortified Victoria. Marcus stopped recording and approached Kesha. "This is going to be very interesting when it hits social media," he said with a smile. And as Manhattan's elite continued to process what they had just witnessed, a lesson in prejudice, humility, and the difference between social class and true class, one question lingered in the air. How would William Thompson, a man who built his empire on his reputation, deal with the fact that his arrogance and prejudice had been exposed in the most public and humiliating way possible, and that this exposure was about to spread far beyond that ballroom? Marcus's recording spread across social media like wildfire. In less than 24 hours, Millionaire humiliates legendary ballerina had become a worldwide trending topic, racking up millions of views and indignant comments. The next morning, William Thompson awoke to discover that his company had already lost $3 million in contracts overnight. His partners were demanding an emergency meeting, and his wife, Victoria, had locked herself in their bedroom, refusing to appear in public. "Dad," Jonathan said when he found his father in his office, surrounded by newspapers with devastating headlines. "The board has voted. You have 1 hour to resign, or you will be removed by force." William looked at his son, seeing for the first time not submission, but determination. "You did this," he murmured. "You betrayed me." "No," Jonathan replied calmly. "You betrayed yourself the moment you decided your arrogance was worth more than your humanity." Meanwhile, Kesha was being bombarded with offers. 3 international ballet companies wanted her to choreograph special performances. Lincoln Center called, offering a solo event. Hollywood producers were interested in turning her story into a movie, but the offer that touched her most came from an unexpected group, the children at the community school where she had taught before working for Thompson Holdings. They had pooled their savings, just $23, to offer her a scholarship to return to teaching. "I'll take it," Kesha said tearfully, "but on one condition. Let's turn this into something bigger." 6 months later, the Kesha Maroro Center for the Arts opened in the heart of Manhattan, funded by donations that poured in from around the world after her story went viral. Jonathan Thompson, now running a completely revamped version of the family business focused on social responsibility, was the first major donor. William Thompson, meanwhile, had lost everything: his company, his reputation, his family. Victoria had filed for divorce and moved to Europe. He was last seen working as a low-level consultant at a small firm, a shadow of the arrogant man who once believed money gave him the right to humiliate others. "You know what impresses me most about this whole story?" Marcus said during the center's opening, watching Kesha teach a class of diverse, smiling children. It wasn't just a victory over prejudice. It was a lesson in how true nobility responds to cruelty. Kesha, now recognized once again as one of the greatest artists of her generation, smiled as she watched her new students perform their first ballet steps. "Sometimes," she said, "we have to lose everything to discover who we really are. And sometimes people have to lose everything to learn who they should never have tried to be." Jonathan approached, carrying flowers from the garden he had planted around the center himself. "Ready for dinner?" he asked, offering his arm to Kesha. "Ready," she replied, accepting not only his arm, but the new life she had built on the ashes of her old one. Kesha's true revenge wasn't destroying William Thompson, it was building. Something so beautiful and inspiring that his cruelty seemed insignificant in comparison. She proved that when we face prejudice with dignity and respond to hatred with excellence, we don't just win, we transform the world around us. What about you? Have you ever faced someone who tried to diminish your dreams because of prejudice? Tell us your story in the comments and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories that prove the best response to those who underestimate us is simply to be extraordinary.